Welcome, everybody, to the Cone of Shame Veterinary Podcast. I am your host, DrAndyRoark. I'm not your host, DrAndyRoark. I have the tables turned on me. My team came to me and said, for the 300th episode, we're going to interview you for the podcast. And so the one and only Kelsey Carpenter is taking over this interview in just a moment. And she's got some listener questions for me. And we have a really good, I hope it's a really good conversation. I'm always fascinated at what my team is interested in knowing from me and what people who listen to the podcast are interested in knowing. And so we talk a lot about work-life balance. We talk about getting everything done. We talk a lot about what it means to actually work for me and what the Uncharted DrAndyRoark team does and things like that. It's I don't know. I hope you guys find it interesting. It's kind of a look into my life and kind of what happens behind the scenes over here. But anyway, thanks a lot, guys, for listening to 300 episodes. I can't believe we got here, and the support has just been absolutely incredible. And so anyway, that's enough for me. Let's get into this episode.
This is your show. We're glad you're here. We want to help you in your veterinary career. Welcome to the Cone of Shame with Dr. DrAndyRoark. Welcome, everybody, to the Cone of Shame podcast. I'm your host, not Dr. DrAndyRoark. I'm Kelsey Carpenter, and we're here today for the, drumroll please, 300th episode of the Cone of Shame podcast. It's a very, very special episode. And why is that, Dr. DrAndyRoark?
I was informed by my team that I would not be hosting this episode. I would be answering questions.
Absolutely. So we have a very special guest on the episode today named Dr. DrAndyRoark. Don't know if you've heard about him. You may have heard his name in that jingle you just listened to. And today what we did is we went to the Dr. DrAndyRoark social media and newsletter, and we asked all of you out there in the audience, what do you want to ask Dr. DrAndyRoark for the 300th episode of the Cone of Shame? And I've gathered these questions, and we're going to turn the mic over to you this time and ask you some questions, Andy. You're on the receiving end this time.
I am ready.
And so for people who don't know you, you're a practicing veterinarian. You're the founder and owner of the Uncharted Veterinary Conference. And you host the Cone of Shame podcast and co-host with Stephanie Goss, the Uncharted Veterinary podcast. You just recently completed your first successful, as our team has called it, Get Up, which is also known in the athletic world as a muscle up. Is it a muscle up?
Muscle up, yeah.
Proud of myself for even getting that far with that.
Good job. That was good.
Is that a pretty decent bio for you? What's a fun fact people should know about you as part of your bio?
As far as my bio, let's see. I have a lot of hobbies. I like to try new things, and I have a lot of hobbies. And my wife is a college professor, and she's brilliant and definitely the more impressive of the duo. And I mention that because I talk about her a lot on the podcast. And then I have two wonderful teenage daughters. And you're like, teenage daughters are not wonderful. And I will say, for their dad, they are.
Yep. Yours are pretty wonderful. Yours put a special touch.
I feel really lucky.
You are. And we especially love your daughters because they are responsible for sending out all our new Dr. Know-It-All games that people have been ordering. Yes. And they are so on top of it. I love it. They're awesome.
They take shipping the Dr. Know-It-All card games to people very, very seriously. And they really on the ball. And so it is a job that they are very proud to have. I love that they can be teenagers and have a job in like packing and shipping, and that they do a good job. But I was, of course you're worried, like, are my kids going to take this seriously? Yeah. And people want their games, and I want them to have a great experience. And boy, they really have shown up in just a way to make me proud. And so if you got a Dr. Know-It-All card game in the mail, you know that my daughters packed that for you with love.
Yep.
And sent it to you.
Yep. I got mine sitting right here on my desk. So, well, let's jump into it. We are asking you questions again that came from the Dr. DrAndyRoark and Cone of Shame audience, which is really exciting. And I have the honor of presenting those questions to you. And so let's kick it off with the fact that here we are on the 300th episode of the Cone of Shame podcast. How did we get here, Dr. DrAndyRoark? How did you go from a, general practice veterinarian to now having hundreds of episodes of podcasts, numerous veterinary conferences, writing, all types of speaking, all types of stuff. How'd we get here?
I did 2 episodes in the last year or so. One was with Dr. Sarah Boston, and one is with Dr. Sam Morello. And they both talk about changes in their career, and they both kind of said the same thing, which was that they're both perpetual ladder climbers, which means they're not messing around. They always want to be improving in what they're doing. And for both of them, they both had radical changes in their career. And I really asked them about, like, how did you decide to put this thing down and do this other thing? And they both said they never really decided to put something down. They always found something else that they were excited about, and they kind of went that way. Mm-hmm. And when they said that, I saw myself in them very much, which is why I had them on, because I was kind of looking at, how do you sort of reinvent yourself and how do you grow? And so the best piece of advice I give to vet students is my advice for them is figure out what you like to do and figure out how to do more of it, and figure out what you don't like to do and figure out how to do less of it. And that's really been my career the whole time. I never had a master plan. I knew that I liked to write. And I knew after I got invited to do some presentations, I enjoy it. I enjoy telling stories. I really enjoy sharing ideas and trying to help people and encourage them. And especially if they have a problem and I can give them some insight from the outside because I'm not so close to the problem, and their eyes go wide and they're like, you're right. That's what I should do. And they know it. I love that. And so it was never this big, I'm going to put down what I'm doing and do that. Everything was incremental for me. And so that's sort of what I would say to people who are like, I've been a general practice vet or a technician for years, and I want to start doing something else. For me, I never bet the farm on anything. I just started doing other work at night and on the weekends. Mm-hmm. And I know that's a lot, but it's work I love and I was excited about it. And then when I was like, okay, I'm convinced that I can keep doing this, then I went from 4.5 days at the clinic down to 3.5 days at the clinic. Mm-hmm. And I cut my salary, like I told them, like, hey, I'm cutting 18%, of my hours. And my expectation is that you'll cut 18% of my pay. And, and they were like, okay, well, it's great. It saves us some money. And they were at a place where they were, they weren't super busy. And they said, it might be if you want to come back, we'll put you back up. And will you help us out if we get shorthanded sometimes? And it's like, sure, I can short-term jump in and cover and, do stuff like that. And I always kept a really good relationship with the practices that I was working at, and they were always supportive of me. And so that's really how it is. But it was never a grand gesture, risk everything. It was always make sure you like doing it, make sure that there's opportunity. And when you build that up, then gently start turning down some of the other things you do. And I've gone through periods where I've gone back to practice and practice full time. And I've gone back down to when I didn't go to practice for a couple of months, there was probably a year or two back in 2016, 2017, 2018. I probably did a dozen days out of the year in the practice. And then, back up now, I'm probably at 75 days out of the year, 100 days out of the year, or something like that. No, not that much, probably 75 days a year, something like that.
That's fascinating. It's funny. That's one of the best lessons I ever learned from you personally. Was I've had a couple scenarios that I've come to you as one of my mentors with, and you've often told me you don't need a master plan. You need a direction and an idea and some foundation, but you don't need to know what the plan is 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I don't need to know how the podcast is going to progress for the next decade. You have to have a strong idea and the passion for it. And you always told me, what is the worst case scenario? It doesn't work, and what happens? You go back to what you're doing. If you leave on a good note, or if you step back on a good note, people will take you back. And that's definitely been true. Always. That's one of the best lessons I've definitely learned from working with you.
Good. Yeah. Don't burn that bridge. But yeah, you're spot on. I always say, have something that you're working on now and know what you want to do next. And beyond that, I've never had a plan that's held up. I've had great, grand aspirations that have never gone anywhere. I think you should always be making a plan. I think you should have a plan. I think you should hold on to it really loosely. And I always love that saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Exactly.
And it's just, in fact, I've had so many plans that just did not have any chance of actually happening when we got into it. But boy, they sounded great.
Absolutely.
when I said them before the time.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to ask you about how you decided on sort of what the Cone of Shame podcast was going to be about, because I distinctly remember the years ago when we started it, you started the Uncharted Veterinary podcast first.
Yeah.
And then I remember you coming to our team and saying, gang, don't freak out.
Everybody freak out.
I want to start a second podcast.
Yeah.
And we all lost it. And then we calmed down and we thought, okay, maybe this would be a good idea. But what made you start the second podcast?
I loved the first podcast so much. I loved it so much. And I wasn't getting to do exactly what I wanted to do. It was never about any project I take on is not about the project. It's about what am I trying to do?
Right.
And so I have imposter syndrome like everybody else. I've got a lot of imposter syndrome. I mean, I'm a general practice doctor. I'm not the smartest clinician that you're going to find by far. And that probably comes through in my interviews of the smartest clinicians that you're going to find. But, I had the insecurity too of like, I don't know. I wanted to make something that people would enjoy listening to. And I don't want to sound dumb and, all those sorts of things, but I genuinely want to learn. And also, I don't like podcasts where two people get on and they both act like they're experts and they're educating the masses.
No.
Like, oh, that's not how I want to learn. I want to hear somebody who's struggling his way through it genuinely ask the questions that he wants to know. And so I'm like, I'm just going to take that mantle and lean into that. I put off a podcast for a long time because I couldn't imagine it in my head. And that was a mistake that I made. And then I could imagine the Uncharted podcast. I was like, I'm going to have a wingman, which always makes things less scary.
Totally.
And I think I see a lot of people now who are starting to do speaking and presenting, and they'll put them in pairs. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it's never as scary when you're putting yourself out there with someone else. And so I got Stephanie Goss to do it with me, and she's such a great conversationalist, and she's so fun and funny, and she's one of those people who draws humor out of me because she'll start giggling.
I was going to say, it doesn't hurt that she laughs at your jokes. That's a good wingman.
Well, she'll start laughing at my jokes, and she's got this giggle, and I will try to make her laugh more.
Absolutely.
Like, whether it's not even intentional, I'm like, well, we're going to keep this going. And I will and then she'll giggle more. And it's this positive reinforcement loop that gets me going. And so we have a great time, and she's just so easy to talk to. And so, and the format is, so people would ask us a management question, and then we'd answer their question. And then I didn't have a worry about, is this useful? It's like, no, they asked the question. Clearly it's useful because they want to know. Right. And so we're gonna do this thing. And after I did it for a while, I thought, this is great. I understand it. I've got confidence now. I always want to make the resources that I want to have. And like I said, I am an average clinician, I think. I think I'm very good relationship builder. I think I'm very good with clients. I hope I'm very good with teams. I think I am. But I am an average clinician when it comes down to the medicine. And I thought about how I like to learn. And the way that I wanted to learn is in an informal way. I like to laugh. I like to have fun. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to mirror the conversations that I have with other people in the doctor's office when I go, hey, Kelsey, I got this case, and this is kind of what I'm looking at. And that's always how I really learned the best in practice. And I really loved learning from my colleagues because I'm asking them for their advice and their perspective. And some of them I agreed with immediately. And some of them I don't look at cases the way that they do. And that's not bad, but I always learn something. And so once I figured out I would like this podcast to exist, and I did not hear anything like that. And I had done the thing with Stephanie. I'm like, I know I enjoy this. I know what's involved in making it. I think I'm going to sort of stick my toe in the water and try it. And so I did. I also had gotten my butt kicked a number of times trying things, and it just crashes and burns. And so my tolerance for failure was pretty high. And I was like, we're just going to do this. I think I even probably said at the beginning, welcome to season 1, because that way, if it stunk and no one listened, I would just be like, and that's the end of season 1, guys. We're going to take a break. And then, and it wasn't like, I would be like, these are the 10 episodes we planned on. No failure here.
Limited, and it's a Netflix limited series.
There's 100%. It was a limited series the whole time, and I'm stopping not because no one listened, but because I wanted to. Exactly. Always set yourself up with an escape hatch like that. Like, whoa, perfect. We'll start with season 1.
Perfect. But no, I love what you say about, I'm the same way. I often, as a veterinary technician, I saw myself as pretty average medical wise. I thought I was quite good with people, the people side of it and the pets. But I'm often the person who's like,
I've got this question and I think it might be dumb and it's in the back of my head, but I'm too scared to ask it. And then you go and you ask it for me on every episode of the podcast. And that is helpful.
I wrestle with that.
Yeah. But I think that ties me into another question that we got from our audience here. I say our because it is my podcast now.
You sing the theme song. Like we didn't mention that. It's you that sings the theme song.
Speaking of, that's one of my most memorable moments of the Cone of Shame podcast was being terrified to write my first jingle. And you put so much faith in me. And then I remember the very end of the jingle, I had to record that. Like, I'm not kidding, 27 times I had to say, with Dr. DrAndyRoark, because it's really hard to say your name in a way that like phonetically comes out without sounding dumb and in like a very tight music window. That was so a challenge, is saying your name perfectly. But
when I hired you, I was like, Kelsey, I have unique challenges for you. Are you sure you want this job? And you were like, I'm up for unique challenges. You had no idea.
How about we do one season of me working with you? We'll see how it goes.
How it goes. 3 months season.
Yeah. But that ties me into another question that we had is, why is it called the Cone of Shame?
Well, I made a YouTube show, which was supposed to be for pet owners.
Right.
And it was a comedy page. It was a comedy show. I do improv comedy, and I had other comedians that would come over, and I would show them the scripts, and then we would kind of do a read through on the scripts, and they would pitch jokes, and we would laugh together and come up with jokes to go in it. So it's actually written like a sketch show, and I want it to be educational for pet owners and stuff like that. And I put it out, and it did well. I mean, some of these episodes, they got 300, 500,000 views. It was a ton of work.
Yeah.
It was a ton of work to make it.
I remember those days.
And yeah, it was really hard to write the scripts, and then filming the way that we did, it was really grueling. It took a lot out of it, and it was out of me. And I was one of those things where I really, after about 6 months or so, I was like, this is killing me. This is really taking a lot of time. And it was not work I really enjoyed. And that's kind of what I learned about myself is I love pet owners, but the idea of making educational content for pet owners, it does not light my fire.
Yeah.
The way that making stuff to support vet teams does. Vet people are just my people. I just love them. And I want to work for them. And pet owners are great. And I do like pet owners, but they're just not my people in the same way where I'm like, I'm going to stay up at night and work on something for you.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but I did love that show, and that name was perfect. And we had a logo for it with the cone on me. And it was just, I thought it was really funny. And so that was when I learned the thing about seasons, because we just started making them. In hindsight, I wish I had made season 1. I wish we had done 10 episodes and then put it down for 3 or 6 months. And then I probably would have picked it back up and done 10 more, and I probably could have kept it going, but I didn't. I was like, we're doing this every week. And it just burned me. It just burned me out. But boy, I learned from that. But anyway, I love that branding. I love that logo. I love that kind of goofy feel. The Cone of Shame for me, when I have guests on, especially we have like some of the best guests in the world as far as like these people are credentialed 87 different ways, and just they literally wrote the textbooks that I used in vet school.
Literally.
It's incredible. And the nice thing is I want them to come in and know what they're walking into. And so it's hard to be like, you're on the Cone of Shame podcast. Don't take yourself too seriously. Yep. I think they get it. I think if I called it like veterinary insights, right, people would show up with this sort of different attitude. It's like, look, buddy, this is the Cone of Shame.
Welcome
like,
in.
Yeah. If you wanna have a margarita while you're here, you can.
Welcome.
It's recorded virtually. You just make it yourself.
Exactly. No, it's true that I remember our beloved friend and coworker Maria asking at one point, because she does a lot of work on the podcast, talking about why is it the Cone of Shame? And I remember you kind of phrasing it as, I don't mind being the one to wear the Cone of Shame and ask all the questions that, you want to ask, but you maybe feel uncomfortable doing. And I love that. Yeah.
Well, that is the other part of it too. And that is true. It goes right back to this thing of, it is kind of an inside joke for me, because I knew at the beginning, I did not want to be on a podcast where I pretended to be an expert.
Exactly.
Talking to other experts to educate the masses. That's condescending. I don't want to dunk on other people doing it. And people really don't like to look dumb. And I get it. Cone of Shame, part of it's for me is like, you know what? I will ask the stupid question.
Yeah.
I will ask the question. Sometimes I genuinely don't know and I feel like I should know. And sometimes I'm like, I have a pretty good inkling here, but this feels like the obvious next question to be complete. And so I'll ask the dumb question, but it is the cone of shame. And I use that as a reminder to myself to ask the silly question, the question that makes you insecure. And honestly, the feedback we've gotten has always been wonderful. And I am amazed that we get like 10,000 people a week listen to the podcast. It's insane.
I'm not surprised though, because I heard this thing recently, and it was something along the lines of, there are no unique messages. If you think about all the minds in the world, the ideas have all been had, but there are unique messengers. The way you portray the message is unique. And I think that is very true, because the things we're covering on this podcast are not necessarily unique. They're not necessarily all novel ideas, but it's the way you ask the questions, and it's the way the guests bottle this incredible information in their minds into such a consumable presentation that it makes it so that I, as a veterinary technician, can listen and learn something. A CSR could listen and learn something. A pet owner could listen and learn something. A fellow veterinarian can listen and learn something. I think that's what's valuable about it. But another big question that we got numerous of, this is the one, is you're doing all this. You're doing 2 podcasts. You're doing numerous conferences. You're speaking. You're working in the clinic. You have a whole family. You have a dog. You have all this stuff. How do you balance it all? What is the Dr. DrAndyRoark secret to balancing it? And still having a life as well outside of it all.
Yeah. If there is a secret, it's not sexy. It really is. It's being intentional. And I live out of my calendar, and I don't know how else to live. But if it's not on my calendar, I generally am not doing it. And that's not a flex, but that's just true. I am intentional. And so I was at the clinic this morning. I got up, I set the alarm so that I could get up and walk my dog and eat my breakfast and see my kids and get to work. And so I did that. And someone else reached out to me yesterday and said, "Can you talk?" And I said, "I can call you from the car when I come home from the clinic." And I put it on my calendar to call him from the car. And so then I went to the clinic, and I did not mess with my other stuff. I was head down. When I am on the floor, I want to be on the floor. When I am there, I am not trying to do other stuff. And I think it's a big thing. I don't believe in multitasking. And so I am there. I am going to be head down. I am going to be present with the patients. I'm going to be present with the team. I want them to have my full attention. I just feel I have tried to multitask, and it made me miserable, and it did not help me. And so I am there, and I am head down. And then I got out. I made the phone call on the way home. I had a 1:30 phone call lined up with our team to plan content for Uncharted in the first quarter of next year. And everybody was there. There was a shared Google Documents. People had already put their ideas of what they were excited about for our member community in there. And we went to work on it. I finished that phone call 10 minutes before I got on to this podcast with you. and here we are. I've got a podcast after this that I'm doing that I'm excited about. And then I'll be done at 5 p.m., at which time I will cook dinner. And then at 7 o'clock, I take my daughter to dance class. And so that's and again, that's how it is. And I am stacked pretty regularly like that. But that's really the thing. The other part I'll say too, because this is a thing that I just, it's important for me to say. For a long time, I just worked really hard. I like to work. I have a strong work ethic, but I really struggled with just working all the time. And so anyway, I put family stuff, like I said, take my daughter to dance. That's on my calendar. So that, and I treat it like I treat being at the vet clinic.
Like an
those
appointment.
are of equal weight to me. It's just a big thing. I go to the gym. I go to the gym at 6 a.m. And it's just because it fits into my day. But I'm in bed. 9:30 comes around, and I'm in bed. But I schedule things to put them in. Here's the big thing, and I really, if there's one thing I could make veterinarians hear or people in vet medicine hear, take your vacation time and put it on your calendar now for next year, for 2025. Go through your calendar and block the time on your calendar you're planning to be on vacation. And if you're like, I don't know where I'm going to go, then start blocking some long weekends. And here's the thing. You can move those blocks around on your calendar. If you plan to take a long weekend, the first weekend of March, but then they need you at the clinic, move it to the second weekend of March. But don't delete it. And ultimately, your calendar will fill in around these blocks.
Yeah.
And then you will have that vacation time on your calendar. And I want you to be just as present on that vacation time, that time for you, as you are when you're at the clinic. I want people to vacation as hard, meaning as focused, as intentionally, as when they go to the clinic. And it's not easy as you think. And this is from a guy who went 3 years and didn't take a vacation early in my career. And that was a mistake. And so anyway, that's one of the big things for me is that I learned is if you're going to just keep the hammer down and kind of work, I have to take care of myself. And I do that by looking ahead a year, blocking my time off. And sometimes I'll block a week off with no plans to do anything. And ultimately I will go camping that weekend with my family, or I'll do a staycation. Go moose hunting. I will enter a kung fu death tournament like I do. It's like, or I'll clean the house and do all of the crap that I always say if I had time I would do this, and then I just feel it. But anyway, so that does the answer.
Looking to protect your canine patients against parasites? Look no further than Simparica Trio, Serraline Moxidectin and Pyrantel chewable tablets. The first chewable to offer triple protection from heartworm disease, ticks and fleas, and roundworms and hookworms. It's also FDA approved to block infections that may cause Lyme disease by killing deer ticks.
Use with caution in dogs with a history of seizures. Serraline or belongs to the isoxazoline class, which has been associated with neurologic adverse reactions. The most common side effects were vomiting and diarrhea.
Visit SimparicatRioDVM.com for full prescribing information.
I see on your social media comments from people all the time, I wish I could work with you, Dr. DrAndyRoark. And I will say, as someone who gets to work with you, not in the clinic, but still, what's beautiful about how you run your own life is, as a leader, it sets an example for the rest of us in the team. And you really respect that for the whole team. You don't just apply it for yourself. And when we show up to meetings, we are all very present, but we also very much respect each other's time off. And we very much believe, and you have set this culture for us of time off is time off, time on is time on. They don't need to overlap. We can send each other some pictures of our vacations, but we're not working when we're off. And that being so present and intentional about that time, I think it has trickled down to all of us, which I appreciate.
I talked to a young practice owner recently. He's in Uncharted, and so he was one of the practice owners in Uncharted. And he's young. He's got a young family. He's got a young practice. So it's funny. He's only been the owner for about a year or two, and he sort of bought it just that time ago. And his philosophy on leadership was one that I used to have, which is I want to set an example. So he was the first one in the building and the last one to leave. And he saw as many appointments as any other doctor, and then also managed the clinic. And he's got young kids at home. And he's a year or two in, and he's like, this is not sustainable. And I was so glad he said that, because it was a look at my younger self. And Kelsey, I've tried to reimagine for myself what it means to be a good leader in my mind. And I don't buy anymore the idea that a good leader is the first one to arrive and the last one to leave. I think the good leader models the behavior that he or she wants to see. And so for me, it's more important that you put yourself on the floor and then be fully present on the floor and work the way that you want other people to work. And if you're on your phone and you're kind of goofing off or whatever, then that's how you want other people to behave on the floor.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And then I think you should model the behavior of blocking yourself off to step away and do things that the team needs that are not involving you in the exam room. And then you should model the behavior of going home and being present with your family. Because if you're not, then again, it always sort of sends these mixed messages. But to me, that was a way of taking my aspiration of being a quote unquote good leader and putting it into a framework that made me want to be a leader. Dr. Michael Miller, who's been on the podcast before, and this is one of the things he said on the podcast. He was like, as leaders, we've often done a good job of modeling a job that no one wants to have.
Absolutely.
We're like, look at me sacrificing everything. Don't you want to be a practice owner? Don't you want to be someone in a leadership position? The answer is no. We're modeling this horrible position. We no one else wants to have. And so I try to get away from that. It's taken time. And again, I can say that now that I'm older. When I was young and I was really worried the wheels were going to fall off, I'm sure I was harder to work with. You were there the whole time. You would know. Have I gotten easier to work with as the years have gone on?
I plead the fifth. I'm just kidding.
Okay, all right.
I'm just kidding. No, actually, no. You were really the first person I ever worked with where I saw that you would say, okay, guys, I've got a hard stop at the end of this meeting because I need to go to pick up my daughters from school. And I remember that being so shocking because when I joined your team, I was in a place where I was a lead technician at work and I had my work email linked on my phone. I was checking it 24/7. I was showing up around the clock. And then you modeled a completely different way for me. But it very quickly became clear why it worked, which was that when you get to go pick up your daughters from school, it charges you back up. So that then tomorrow, when it's time to get back into work mode, you're ready to be 100% there. And I've experienced it myself now where I've started having very clear weekends. Saturdays and Sundays, I do not work. And I notice that when I come back on Monday, I am like feet on the ground, ready to go. And I see now why it works. And so it has helped me a lot. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm glad you said that. That is true. And again, when the pandemic hit and everybody's working themselves to death, I made this video about the troops are tired. I got a lot of feedback on it. That was very positive. But it is true. I think that's the way to look at a lot of this. I want my team to accomplish as much as they can accomplish. But part of accomplishment is working hard and then resting and recovering. And you have got to have that mindset as a leader, as a manager of people. If you just bear down on people, you're going to break them. You're going to wear them out and you're going to break them, yourself included. But really playing chess instead of checkers is looking at your team and recognizing how to strategically rest them. Meaning I set a good culture. I model the work ethic that I want to see. And then I cycle off and I rest and I come back so I can model that behavior again. And it's funny. You can see how people push themselves and then you keep going, you're there, but you're grinding it out. And the truth is in my experience, I can make up for lost time if I'm rested. If I've had a break, I can be efficient and I can be nice. And every time that you're tired and burned out in practice, and you hurt somebody's feelings, and then you have to go back and sort that out, that sort out time, that's a penalty for you not being your best earlier. And so the more I can take care of myself so that I avoid making those types of mistakes that I then have to clean up, the more efficient I can be. And so honestly, for a lot of people, I think that they could be off the floor more than they are and make that productivity up.
And use the time off the floor better. I think back to when I was in the clinic and I would take my lunch break, and on my lunch break, I would check all of the DrAndyRoark and Uncharted social media posts, and then I would check my work email, and then I would get on Slack and send some messages. And then I come back to work after my hour lunch break and I'd be like, I'm exhausted, because I didn't actually take a lunch break. But you mentioned the team earlier, and that was another question we got is, who is behind you on this podcast project? What kind of team do you have supporting you?
Again, I have a great team. I do a lot of different things. So we talked about, we have this card game, which is kind of a weird side project that just makes me really happy. And I love it. And so I've got this card game, and then we have Uncharted, and we do conferences, we do live events, we do lectures and workshops, we do a lot of consulting. We work with a lot of corporate hospitals on training their leaders, their medical directors, their practice managers. And then we also do the podcasts and social media and things like that. So we have a bunch of different stuff that's going. Our team doesn't really fall into your traditional jobs. And that's by design. I'm not that way. I don't follow rules very well. And so people are like, well, Kelsey is in marketing. I'm like, no, Kelsey is in these
everything.
6 things. Well, she's in these 6 things that she's really good at, and they don't all fall under marketing. But and again, I know that doesn't work at scale at a big company. We're not a big company. We're a company of less than 10. And so I can have people kind of working across our company. We also run what's called a flat organization, which means aside from me, there's not a lot of people who are other people's bosses. We have an executive director, but other than that, I really don't like people to be other people's bosses. I like us to be, we're colleagues, we're teammates. I expect you to use your grown-up voice and your grown-up words to communicate what you need and where you are. And then somebody shouldn't have to be your boss to get you to help them. You should help them because we're in this together, we're a team. And again, there's upsides to that approach and there's downsides to that approach, but it's just philosophically, it has always meant a lot to me. So anyway, in our team, I've got you who designed our cards. You made what's on my scrubs, the Dr. Know-It-All game, the box that it comes in is all Kelsey's beautiful creative work. She sings the theme song on this podcast. She does a lot of my social media stuff. And so if you, especially that for DrAndyRoark, almost all that stuff is Kelsey. She and I work together on that stuff, but she's so wonderfully creative. And so Kelsey's kind of got this type of stuff. And then you get tapped for things like interviewing me on the podcast and stuff like that.
I get to be a podcast host as part of my job. That's pretty cool.
We've got Maria Parita, she's kind of our podcast coordinator and guru. She involves the scheduling. She handles the sponsored episodes and the advertisements. She comes up with great ideas. It's hard to explain all of the things she's done as far as making the podcast and streamlining that process. And then, like when she's not doing that, she's also a CVPM. She's a lecturer. She does consulting with me and Stephanie Goss. She is a rising star as far as being a management speaker in vet medicine, and so she's there. Dustin Bays is a friend of mine who does the actual editing and processing of the podcast, and now he's basically full time at Uncharted as well, and he does our video editing and our podcasts. And so Stephanie Goss was my co-host over at Uncharted, and she helps me over there. And I'm sure I'm probably forgetting somebody, but that's just the core group that works on the podcast. And Tyler Grogan helps us with our marketing and our newsletters and things like that.
And she's got a lot of hands in the Uncharted podcast. And
we're all kind of with Uncharted. Yeah.
Now that you really lay it out that way, I realize how abnormal that is. That like every member of our team is involved in the podcast in some way or another. But in that way, it makes it such like a collaborative project, which is pretty fun.
Super cool. Well, I want to work in a really collaborative place when I do that. And I'm a big believer in the simple philosophy that you get the most out of people when you put them in a position to really use their strengths.
Yeah.
And if you can, and I've also come to believe too that just because something is a weakness of mine doesn't mean it's a weakness of other people's. And just because I don't really enjoy something, that doesn't mean other people don't enjoy it. I don't like organizational stuff, administrative stuff. And we've had other people on our team who just live to put things in order, to make sure all the boxes are checked and everything is organized. And buddy, I've got work for you. Come, but put them in a place to thrive, and then they just do. So it's really that for me. It's funny. The hard part is, and you guys have all been through this, we continue to try new things. And when we try new things, everybody kind of has to adapt and find their role in those things. And that's always a rocky process. And I think everybody wishes I could say, Kelsey, you're in charge of marketing. Here is this thing. And you would just know what you're supposed to do. This way, the collaborative way, it is slower and it requires slowing down at the beginning. But my belief is the ultimate outcome is better. We get a superior product. We get to work in a way that's energizing for us, where we are collaborating, creating, remembering what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so anyway, that's how we've always run the company, and I don't regret it.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about it myself. Now, a quick fun question for you is, because you do seem to have a lot of projects going on. People want to know, what does Dr. Andy Roark, what kind of coffee do you drink?
What kind of coffee do you drink? Oh, I talked about this.
What keeps you moving throughout the day?
Yeah. I made videos. My wife got me an espresso machine about 2 years ago.
I forgot about this.
I drink espresso, and I get it from Amazon in big, unground bags. Whole bean bags, baby.
I love it. Now, okay, what I'm personally really curious about is, like, if I took you to Starbucks, if I was like, let's go on a walk, let's go to Starbucks. What's the Dr. Andy Roark Starbucks order? You're at Starbucks. What's the special drink order? I want to know. Like, are you a pumpkin spice girl? Tell me the truth.
No.
Okay.
No, it's such a letdown. I I'm crotchety in weird ways.
Oh no.
And I refuse to learn the Starbucks language. And
So you say, I want a large, and they say,
I want a
grande?
medium. I said, I want a medium coffee. That's what I'll say. And they'll go, do you want something in it? And I was like, some cream. And that's it. Like, that's what they get from me. I want a medium coffee with cream.
Wow. If anything ages you, it's that.
I know. I have these strange things I rage against, and that's one of them.
Yes.
So dumb. It's like a revolution no one cares about but me. Yeah. But yeah, I am super easy to buy. We joke about Starbucks, and you'll remember this. Another thing I rage against is when we put on a conference and I have to buy coffee for the attendees, and I buy it by the gallon, and it costs me literally $100 a gallon of coffee. And my team is like, let's get Starbucks orders. And I'm like, just bought $7,000 worth of coffee. And they're like, but it's not a Frappuccino. And I'm like, I just can't. Like, they have to do it secretly because I will crumple to the ground. Yep. In frustration.
One day I'm just going to show up and hand you like whatever the most extravagant, like caramel Frappuccino with cold whipped oat milk, bronze. I don't know how that works, but I'm going to get you something with whipped cream on it. That's for sure. Change your life.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll kind of wrap this up. I could ask you questions for days. We all could. But as we close out this episode, are there any especially memorable moments, episode, guests, memories that you have from the past 300 episodes of this podcast?
Oh, man.
I'm putting you on the spot here. You got to think through 300 episodes.
Great. Well, there's always the first one. And so Dr. Sarah Boston, who is a surgeon, an oncosurgeon, talk about brilliant. Yeah. She's an oncosurgeon and also a stand-up comedian and a really funny, really good stand-up comedian. She was my guinea pig for the podcast. And I had her on because she wrote an article about emotional blackmail in vet medicine. And I was like, that's it. I'm talking to her. And that was the first podcast that we did. And we put it out like 2 months before the next episode would come out. But it was completely, we recorded on Skype. It was a disaster. But other than what we talked about, which was great. And it got so much attention. And so that was the first thing that I was like, we did one swing and one hit. And I was like, great.
Well, I remember, was that the episode that I feel like the title was, Are We Bad People?
Are We Bad People? Wasn't that it? It was either that one or a follow-up I did with her, which is Are We Bad People? One of those, yeah. Are We Bad People also did really well.
Yeah.
There's been some episodes we've done that have been really funny. When I interviewed Gabe Matthews, the paranormal investigator for Halloween last year. And
that was my favorite.
I read him real ghost stories from vet clinics that people sent in. And then I got his breakdown. I do like a how do you treat that case with Gabe Matthews, the paranormal investigator. And he sprayed me with, I don't know, some sort of incense that it didn't come out for days. I stunk. That was funny. I thought the April Fool's episode, Cono de Peña, when I announced that I had been doing Duolingo and we were going to be switching to Spanish, I thought that was hilarious. It did not.
I know. I
don't think people got it.
We unintentionally got some people's hopes up. People really have faith.
Oh, exactly. Some people
were
like, yeah. Some people were really excited. Then I was like, I feel bad because I'm letting these people down. Like, that was good. When we were doing the 4 Eyes Save Lives stuff, and we're talking about vet suicide, and I got to host Dr. Tracy Whitty, who was rolling out this new research on the impact of access to lethal means on suicide in vet professionals. That felt really important to me at like a deep personal level, and getting to talk to her and have her talk about her research that was just getting published in a way that I thought was really accessible. That felt like really important work. When I interviewed Dr. Julie Levy on the black market cure for FIP, this was well before it got conditional approval in the USA, and people were getting it through a Facebook group, but it was saving cats' lives. Yes. That was the most popular episode we ever did. I mean, it had, it had 5 figures in place for that episode. But that also felt really important in the number of people who shared it and who said, "Oh man, this saved my pet's life." That was big for me. There was another one just as a personal one. Dr. Ashley Bourgeois is she's She's great.
The Durham vet.
The Durham vet. She had this experience. She talked about caregiver burden because her young child, and I remember this happened. She was at a conference, and then her young child was diagnosed with leukemia, and suddenly it was a fight for life. And she talked about that experience, and she's still there. She's still seeing appointments. She's making social media content and sort of talking about dermatology and educating, and she's carrying this burden behind the scenes. And so she came and she talked about sort of her journey, and that meant a lot.
Yeah.
And then the last ones I'll say is I've had so many people I can't list, but there are these people who are at the top of their field, and they are so smart that their clinical genius has just bled into the way that they think and they talk. And I would ask them a question, and then they would tell me a story, and I'm like, why are you telling me this? And then I would realize that they had just given me this huge gift of knowledge. And like my mind would be. Dr. Doug Mader is one of those for me. He's someone I just admire him. He's an excellent writer, which I really like. He's got a book called The Vet at Noah's Ark, which was really cool. Mm-hmm. But he'll start answering a question, and then he'll tell you all the history kind of around the question, and he'll tell you who discovered the answer to the question and in what species they were working when they did. And it's just, his knowledge is so deep. It's just, it blows my mind. Dr. Tim Evans is a toxicologist, parasitologist at University of Missouri. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know him. And someone put me in touch with him, and he did this like name that nephrotoxin episode with us.
Oh, yeah.
And
that was a great one.
Funny.
Yeah.
He was so funny, and his knowledge was so endless. And if I had let him, he would have talked for the rest of the afternoon. Yeah. But anyway, there's just people like that it's their style, and they are so excited about what they know. And you just realize this person could talk to me for a year.
Yeah. You could do a whole season on them. Yeah.
This guy, I mean, you could get your whole residency done with this one person. But anyway, and we just had a number of episodes like that have been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, I just want to share with you my own experience has been that an unintended positive from this podcast. As you know, I went through some health issues, which forced me out of the clinic before I was ready to leave the clinic. And I would say the Cone of Shame podcast is probably the one thing that has made me feel the most involved in veterinary medicine still, because I still get to know, what are people talking about? What's the new drug that's coming out? What's the specialty that we're really focusing on right now? What are the issues that people are talking about? What are we seeing coming in the future? Getting to listen to this podcast has made me feel like I still get to be a part of this veterinary community. And that's a very special gift. And I feel it's probably safe to say I'm not the only one who it's had that effect on. So thank you for 300 fabulous episodes. Thank you. And thank all of the incredible people who have been part of this podcast. So
thanks to everybody who's listened to 300 episodes.
Yeah.
You guys are amazing. I said, I love this thing. I think I would do it if nobody listened, but listeners are really nice.
Absolutely. Now, to end this on the typical Cone of Shame podcast style, Dr. Andy Roark, where can people find you?
You can find me on this very podcast. Yeah. You can find me and Kelsey Carpenter collaborating on Facebook and Instagram, and even the TikTok these days at DrAndyRoark. And yeah, that's it. Check out Uncharted Veterinary Podcast. If you are in a leadership position and you enjoy hearing my voice, you'll hear a lot of it over there. Me and Stephanie Goss, we've got 300 episodes over there just fixing hospitals. And so anyway, I do love that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Andy Roark, for being my guest on my podcast, The Cone of Shame, today only. And thank you all for listening. Thank you all for submitting your questions. This has been a fabulous episode. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is where you are. And we'll catch you on the next episode.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And that's what we got, guys. Thanks for tuning in. 300 episodes is amazing. Again, I feel just so fortunate and grateful, and I feel fortunate and grateful to have people like Kelsey Carpenter and the rest of my team in my life. And so anyway, it's just it's been a great run, and I'm looking forward to keeping it up. So anyway, guys, take care, everybody. Talk to you later.